The evolvement of journalism, especially in India, has been a topic of hot debate. Today, journalism goes beyond just reporting and informing. Sri Mukund Padmanabhan, editor of the renowned and esteemed newspaper The Hindu, is here to touch on the very subject with the topic Journalism, New Threats and Challenges. Sri Mukund holds a master's in philosophy. He was also the editor of the Hindu Business Line, the group's financial newspaper. He curates the two festivals of theatre and music, namely the Hindu Theatre Fest and the Hindu November Fest, on behalf of the newspaper group. Welcome, Sri Mukund. Over to you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me here. Listening to Mr. Madhavan on Parliament, I couldn't help but being struck on some similarities. I think, like Parliament, I think the press also is in some need of, correcting public perceptions about it. I think I can't remember a time in my 3 decades in journalism when the reputation of the press has been on such a low. Every morning I open my Twitter feed, and there are a whole host of people trolling you and saying all kinds of things. Some of it perhaps is true, and so that's a kind of corrective, so I check it every day, but some of it is just in the nature of probably, to put it bluntly, fairly abusive. So I think we live in a climate where this is something that we need to correct, but also another kind of similarity. He talked of strengthening Parliament, and to some extent what little I have to say here today is related to possibly the need, perhaps, to strengthen the institution of the media and the press. The subject I've been asked to speak about is the threats and challenges to journalism today. And since I'm from the field of print, I'll just focus principally on print journalism, which, as you're possibly aware, is facing a sort of serious existential crisis in the West. And many people think it's only a matter of time before something very similar happens in India as well. But just before I get into that, since this is the home city in a way, the city of where we are headquartered, Chennai, and I suspect at least many of you, I hope, or at least some of you are readers of The Hindu. I'd just like to spend a few minutes, and this is related, talking about some of the changes we made recently to the newspaper. Just a minute. If you're a regular reader of The Hindu, you'd have noticed that we did what in the existing environment and context is pretty surprising things. We increased the number of pages in the paper radically. We now have a big fat Sunday edition, which is, I think, a minimum of 44 pages or 44 to 48 pages. We have many more pages in our supplements. We've bulked up the magazine. We've reintroduced a supplement that died somewhere along the way called the Literary Review. So we've gone against the grain in some ways, where newspapers have been slimming down, have been cutting costs, and have been tightening their belts and getting smaller and smaller, and actually gone bigger. And while this, on the face of it, I think reflects a certain confidence about the product and its traction and with the public, and I think this is a result of that. But at the same time, there is absolutely no editor in no newsroom in this country who is completely oblivious of what he or she believes is a sort of looming challenge, and that is the threat posed by the digital world or the internet. Now, if you look at the West, the internet has just completely altered the print landscape, totally. News is available free online. Content produced by newspapers and magazines aggregated by others. who use their platforms to, I mean, Google, Facebook, and Twitter have become the biggest media companies in the world. In fact, Google is the biggest media company in India today, and already. And these are platforms that just ride on the back of content that people like us produce and others, and send it over on the internet, which people access through their mobile phones and so on. And in India, we just look at the West. I've just come back, for instance, from a conference in Germany a couple of days ago, and it's quite astonishing the degree of gloom, if you like, and also the the struggle to find sustainable revenue models for people to survive, because on the one hand, circulation revenues in print are falling, and on the other hand, they're absolutely, advertising revenues falling as well. So basically, press and the print journalists feel constricted on all ends. And then if you go to a seminar today, you hear all kinds of things that you never heard before. How does the newspaper survive? Does it start? I mean, there was one session I remember about the importance of branding yourself in mugs and calendars and so on as a means to survive. So there are actually seminars on how you do related activity as a means to survive. So it's that kind of situation in the West. And this story of shutting newspapers and layoffs it's so. In fact, there is a website called newspaperdeathwatch.com, and if you look at it, it's quite interesting because it keeps updating you with a newspaper that just died, and it says RIP on the list, and then there's a list of possibly aging newspapers which are waiting to die. So you actually have a website just devoted to this phenomenon that is there in the West. So, I mean, this crisis there is, as I said, I mean, it's not difficult to understand why this is happening. There's a loss of just people are not buying newspapers in the same way. There's a slump in advertising revenue. And it's a pretty secular phenomenon across the West. Online leadership is growing. The Guardian now sells about 10% that, say, the Hindu sells today in print. And for every one person that buys the Guardian, 55 read it free online. So this is the kind of situation that you have. So I think it's a good idea to ask yourself as an editor, and this is something that I struggle with in the newsroom. And I'm just looking at my watch because I was told that we should also have a little interaction and question and answer session, so I don't want to overshoot for so long. Is that has it begun to happen here? If we are still growing, which we are, how long will this last? Is there going to be a tipping point, and one day when the bottom just collapses under you? How strong are the trends which manifest in the West happening here? So it's I mean, on the one hand, some data is worrying. I mean, in 2015, India overtook the US in terms of having the second largest number of internet users in the world. China is the first, of course. So, but on the other hand, much of this is on the mobile, spurred by the access of cheap mobile phones, and many of them are not using this actually to look at news, but perhaps using other services like WhatsApp and Facebook and so on. So in India, we've not yet reached that kind of situation. I mean, there's been no precipitous drop in advertising. The Hindu, at least my CEO likes to say, is the fastest growing English newspaper in the country, so we're still growing in that respect in terms of circulation. And we have an online presence, but there is absolutely nothing happening on that count. I mean, we have a lot of readerships, but it's just a service that we virtually provide free. Our group's online revenues are less than 2% of our total revenues. So, So we put a lot of effort into it, but it's a lot of effort just to be there in case, the entire readership moves. It's not a lot of effort that we put in because we see any revenue in it. So one of the challenges I constantly face is how much of an investment do we make in terms of technology, in terms of journalistic resources into a space which is not yielding much, but it's good for readers. They're getting a lot of stuff free. Also, how much of this is a good thing for journalism? What's happening, at least, and I'm in a minority view here, and so I'd just like to make this point, and I think it's related to this issue of reputation and the press having a lower reputation, I think, than it did when I joined journalism as a young guy. What's happening is this phenomenon of free content and free news has done, to my mind, extremely unfortunate things to the way journalism or journalists conduct their work. So there is this great pressure, for instance, to want to be first with the news. So if you are 1 nanosecond earlier, then Google picks you up and doesn't pick up someone else. So you just got to be there, as quickly as possible. If you write a headline which is crazy and which is unlike any other headline, which is unique and which may have nothing to do with the actual content, then Google picks you up again. And so there's this whole phenomenon called clickbait headlines, which have nothing to do with the news. There's this sensationalist piece of nonsense which is there, but unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that people click on, and that's the kind of thing that give you more eyeballs. So then you're caught in the cycle of trying to reach people. Speculation. When I look at many of, we make mistakes, many more mistakes than we should do every single day, and then we correct them and we agonize over them. But when I look at some of the pure websites that are in play in the news and current affairs space, it is astonishing how much of unverified information goes on there. It's not probably quite fake news, but it's extremely close to that. There is no sourcing. There is no proper attribution. There is speculation. And the worst thing is there is no distinction between news and opinion. So everything gets collapsed in one space. And then people are just sounding more angry. The angrier you are, I think, the more noticed you get today. A phenomenon that you would have noticed is playing out on television as well. So the more noise you make. And this is unfortunate, I think, in my view. And this is actually, in a way, corrupting the demands of the digital space for speed, for clickbait headlines and all of that is sort of infecting, I think, the larger media landscape. And I think it's really unhealthy. Is there a way out of this? And sometimes I agonize about this. Are we going to be stuck with this forever and ever? Is this the way journalism is going to be conducted? Can we go back to the days when, I was a young guy getting into it with some ideals and some hope that we were doing a job that, had value and was useful? And this is a question I keep asking myself, because I think it's not, at one level, the issue is about the survival of the press. It's financial survival. But I think at another level, the issue pertains to broader things and things of value to society, such as free speech, truth telling, the lack of falsity or more accuracy, and the values of democracy itself. And when I look at this picture of gloom, if you like, I just find, two things seem to stand out, I think, in my mind. One is, if we continue to, as a society, to be dependent on news that is free, nothing is going to improve. in the scape. I think we have to find a way of making people pay for news, because only then only does a strong, media, financially viable media, can do the job in the way that I think it should do it. I think if the landscape is only about getting one more eyeball or reaching one more person in whatever way possible, then shortcuts are going to be made. So I think we need to get back to it. Is that going to happen? Are willing to pay? And I'll end by saying this, and here is where I see a sort of small but very a ray of hope, if you like, a silver lining. And if you look at the landscape of the West, where the media is, the print media is suffering and laying off people and shutting down, one of the things that you see is that if you are a serious newspaper, and I hope you also regard us as a serious newspaper, not just a conservative one, in the West, there are just these signs that people are willing to pay for you. So everywhere I look, if you say the New York Times in America, the Economist, the Financial Times in London, Die Zeit in Germany, the other papers as well in places like Holland, only publications that have heft, the International Herald Tribune, the Times of London, only publications that are serious and have heft actually find a readership. And that's interesting. The New Yorker, for instance. The Daily Mail is Britain's, one of the world's largest websites, but and does this extremely arresting mix of crime and legs and cleavage and all of that. But I think if they go beyond the paywall, nobody will pay for them. So I think there is a glimmer of a paying market for serious news. And I hope, at least as a journalist, that some years down the line, this will, this culture will manifest itself in India, and I think that is the one hope. I think that might reverse some of the ills that have plagued the journalist profession and lowered its reputation in the eyes of the people. Thank you. I've been asked to take some questions, so if you have a question, please ask it. Yeah, thank you.
Why a newspaper tries to become a magazine? One. Number two, why the newspapers are taking sides? And previously, if you take the Hindu, there is a credibility. There was a credibility in the news. Now it is not so. Can you answer for these three questions?
I'm not entirely sure by what you mean by a newspaper becoming a magazine, but I think what's happening in the newspaper world is with the advent of television, and particularly the advent of the digital news media, the bare bones of the news are already there, and most people with a cell phone are aware of it. So if there's an accident and 50 dead in some place, you know this already by the time you open your newspaper the next day. So the newspaper, which was the first mode of communication 40 years ago, 50 years ago, as became second after television got and now has become the third source after digital media. So I think what newspapers do is try to weave in background, try to weave in context, try to weave in other things, and perhaps that's what you mean by saying a newspaper has become more like a magazine. I think this process has got to do with the struggle to stay relevant in the face of television and the social media, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the bad thing is when you mix up opinion with news. As far as credibility goes, I would just say one thing. We have a long history. We are 138 years old. I mean, if there is less credibility now, that's something that we have to deal with it. I mean, I respect your view on this, but very often we are victims of an image. And it's an image which is very hard to shake off. I would like you, for instance, to read our newspaper today and tell us whether we mix news and opinion, and show it to me. I think I've been extremely tough on seeing that this distinction is made, that we don't allow the news to get colored by opinion. Um, it's like this comment on conservatism. I'm not sure where it comes from. I mean, the Hindu is a conservative paper, is something that has been said from the 50s. Are we conservative? Are we socially conservative? I think we've been more modern than the Times of India on a number of issues, relating to social issues. Whether it's we've taken voices which are pretty radical on the line. It's another matter that we don't do the stuff that they do on page 3. But is page 3 modernity? Or is it, for instance, how you treat, say, the LGBT community? And perhaps if you read the editorials on it and compare what the Times of India was doing at that time, you'll find completely different. Is that conservative? I don't think so. So all I'm saying is that sometimes an image is pretty difficult to shrug off. And I would urge you to read us carefully and point out where you think we have deviated from this. I think we're one of the few newspapers that actually make a distinction between news and opinion today. And the others have blurred the lines much more than us. Yeah.
Do not reach the poorer or the weaker sections of the society. We take it to cater to the upper class or the well-to-do or the English-speaking class and all that. What are the steps taken by Hindu to reach out the marginalized and the poor people? Thank you.
Okay. The first question is interesting. I mean, you asked whether the press is freer today when it was with the last government, and I'm assuming you're talking about the center and not the state. And I'll just answer this in a roundabout way, because we assume reflexively in India that the big pressure is always coming from the central government. And this is how English-speaking journalists like to frame the debate about free speech in this country and governmental pleasure and so on. But I assure you, and if journalists are honest about this, today, I'm not talking about the situation, say, in the 60s when, the center was, there was a command economy and the center was a huge presence in the life of any newspaper. But I think with deregulation and some of the restrictions on even things like newsprint and so on being lifted, the center is I think less of a player in having a chilling effect on the media than lower down. And this is sometimes that doesn't get play. I mean, a newspaper published in, say, Bihar or UP would be far more bothered about the chief ministers of those states than someone sitting in Delhi. And I think it goes even further down. I mean, we like to talk about it at a ratified level, but when I look at, say, we have a lot of district correspondents as a newspaper, and I think they walk a very fine line. They have to deal with the superintendent of police there, they have to deal with the collector. So it's not easy being a journalist, at the grassroots, when you're slightly more marginalized. But unfortunately, the entire debate about press freedom in this country is all about what some fairly wealthy or well-to-do English-speaking privileged person has to say in Delhi, where I think his or her voice is not necessarily being stamped out or chilled. So this is the broad thing. Your second question was, look, I mean, we're an English paper. We can only go out to an English audience. And for better or worse, there is a sort of correspondence between, a certain English-speaking class and a certain socio-economic class. And that's something that we can't escape. So if by poor and marginalized you mean somebody who doesn't speak English, we cannot cater to that person at all. What we can do is to write about social issues that go beyond the immediate day-to-day life or day-to-day concerns of the upper middle class or the middle class, which is who we cater to. I think we do that, but do we do it enough? I don't know, perhaps not. I mean, people like you should tell us. Thank you.
With maybe
A paid model?
debates, maybe I think just like maybe what Facebook or Google does, you can do online debates, maybe on the crushing issues, and maybe on the various maybe science and technology, maybe just like can come up with maybe tech geek contests like that. All those things on the current issues, social, maybe you can take it up to the poorest of poor and to the rural most India. Get that, maybe you have district level, maybe I think taluk level correspondents. I think they can pull up and they can actually come up with some maybe social economic issues pertaining to that maybe every nook and corner of the state or country. So that is something I think if you can do. I think right now with smartphones across the country, maybe everybody are using it. I think they will maybe plug into your online maybe sessions, and maybe it will be lively, and maybe I think you will get more readership. I think.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
That's a good suggestion.
But
yeah,
it might
we'll try
work
to-
actually in the long run.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the era of technology.
Sorry?
This is the era of technology.
Right.
Twitter, Facebook, they have taken over the entire world. How far journalism will survive? Because everybody, every citizen who is having a smartphone is used to journalism. He shoots, he uploads, and he does the job of a journalist. I am from a journalism background, so I want to know whether this profession will survive for another 5 years, 10 years, or it will just have its end.
I think there are two sides to the question. I'll try and answer them briefly. I think one side was actually what I tried to deal with today, is that if we are going to survive, and if we are not going to let platforms like Google, Facebook and Twitter just use content of ours and monetize it, which is what they're doing, we'll have to find ways of making people pay for us directly. So that's one side of the question, and I think there is some hope that readers are willing to pay for what they see as good journalism that they value. So I think, and that kind of is coming out in a nascent way from, experiences of some publications in the West. The other question was, you're saying, your question was related to, will they, sorry, what did you say? What is the second question? Yeah, I think this business that a citizen journalist will somehow replace professional journalists, I think that's not going to happen, because I think people want news that is mediated, people want news that's sourced. So much of fake news exists. So a lot of citizen journalism is very good, but I think when it's mediated and it's controlled, I mean, there's a lot of rubbish that you see in the social media, unverified stuff that makes out. So I think there will be always be a demand for credible news. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sri Mukund sir, for the valuable insight. I request Mr. T.N. Ashok to present a memento on behalf of Prime Point Foundation, Presence and Sansad Ratna Awards Committee to Sri Padmanabhan as a token of appreciation and gratitude.